the Daf Mesechta Yoma Daf Lamed Zayin, begin 9 lines down at the top of the Yomah, where we continue the halacha of the previous Mishnah regarding we have the Kohen Gadol starting off basically the Avodas Hayom over here, where he comes to his bull and he does one of two viduyim that he does, which he does for him and his family, and we continue regarding what the procession is from that part of the Avodah. Shiz Kosbaz because of the Chesed and Daf Chaim Krishna was joining today's Daf. Should be a schus for Tinik Ben Yehudas. Something that's discussed in today's daf are the lots that were cast in Kippurim for the Sari and Kippurim, which that's going to be the halacha of the next Mishnah. We're going to do in the famous Goyrel. Mentioned the two tablets which were there, these lotteries, Lashem Azazel, which were ultimately made by Gol Beishum Gamla, and it describes other innovation enhancements to the Beis Hamikdash, which they were praised that they went and they upgraded the elements in the Beis Hamikdash. And we have we start off with the daf with two sources responding when you hear the name of Hashem. Some of the key concepts of Anshe Mishmar, those were the count was split up into 24 groups. Every single week was a different Mishmar, and every single day was a different subcategory of that family. Anshe Maimon, where they actually split up Klal Yisrael also into 24 groups, where they had many that came up to Yerushalayim, and they were there standing over, like the Bailam have to be over the carbon to be there. So we begin the current daf. We start by the two dots, 9 lines down at the top of the Yomid. We said the Kohen Gadol would do the confession, he would do the Vida, and they said, Ona Hashem, they heard Hashem's name, and they would answer, Baruch Shem, when they heard Hashem's name being mentioned. Now, time to learn the Brisa, where do we know this from? So Rabbi Shloimy says, because it says the pasuk it says in Devar, it says, Kishim Hashem, when I call out God's name, you should bring greatness to our God. Which Amala Moshe is what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling to Klal Yisrael. When they mention God's name, you bring greatness, and that's what we say, Kavod Malchusai, that's what we say when we hear Hashem's name, we say Baruch Shem. Another source, Kanan ben Achir B'Shua, he says the pasuk initially, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. When you recall a righteous, it's for a blessing. Well, Amlam Navli saw the prophet telling the Jewish people, when I mentioned the righteous one of the world, meaning Hashem, you give a blessing. So that's what it says, Zecher Tzadik, which Hashem is the Tzadik, Yisrael Olam, Levracha, you make a bracha, you say Baruch Shem Kibad Machos Levracha. See now, look at the next Mishnah, which again, we're continuing this Avodah the Kohen Gadol. He just came to his par, the Ilm back. And now the Mishnah says, Bola Lemizach Hazar, he comes to the eastern part of the Hazar, meaning, as Rashi explains, he's walking backwards towards the east, closer to the entryway of the Hazara, because they wouldn't bring the Seirim, which were these two Seirim, one's going to be Lashem, one's going to be Lazazel, to make the lottery. They didn't bring it Benul Mizbeach. Rather, just that it should be in the ear space of the Hazara, like the pasuk of the Rikit Zayin, the Hemelasim of Hashem, had to be Lofnei Hashem. But they didn't bring it so close towards the Heichel. Only when it came time to Shech, the Sar Lashem, then they would bring it closer, as the Mishnah teaches later on in Gimel Beis. Then they brought the Sar closer to Shechta. But when they did it for the lottery, it was basically just right inside the Hazara, closer towards the east. So he came to the eastern part of the Hazara. Let's soften the Mizbeach, but it's like to be north of the Mizbeach. In other words, it had to be pulled towards the north, in that ear space between Mizbeach and the northern part. Now, although you're not shechting it over here, but still, all the activities had to be done in the north, because ultimately it is Kacha, which the Gemara tells us later on that Safin is not necessarily opposite the eastern part of the Mizbeach. That here it's not opposite the Mizbeach itself, but as long as it's in the Tzafin, so it has to be over there, even though you're not doing the Shechita. So Haskam Eminoi, they had the attendant, which is the deputy Kohen Gadol, was on his right. V'reish Beisav Nismail, he had the head of the court that was on his left. And B'sham Shnei Seir, and they had over there the two he-goats. B'kalpi Yasam, there was a box over there. Ubosh Negarelis, and there was these two lotteries. And Shalosh Ashkeroy, it was made out of boxwood, certain type of material. But for us in Begamla, who Yeshua Begamla, when he was appointed to become the Kohen Gadol, he made a shalzot made out of gold. But you must and they recalled him favorably for that, where he upgraded and made it into gold. Now, other types that were praised for what they made upgrades. Ben Kutner was also Kohen Gadol. Also Yudbeis Dad. He made 12 spouts for the water to pour out, the kir for the water basin. Because originally only had 2, and it was difficult to get everyone to wash their hands. Now, another upgrade he made, as he was explained, a wheel to a pulley system to submerge the kir into a pit, so that the water should be attached to the waters of the kir. So the water should not become invalidated by leaving left that overnight. Because if you wouldn't submerge it, then it become invalidated with lina, because it's sanctified in the vessel, and it's not honorable for kachim to become invalidated unnecessarily. So he made this pulley system that you could put into the water, into the ground, which that's not going to become possible because it's attached to the ground, in the water on the ground. Now Munbez Hamelech, he upgraded. He made all the handles of all the vessels in Mikippurim. Shalzav made out of gold. Hilni Ima, his mother Hilni Hamalka, She made a golden chandelier, a candelabra, shalzav of gold, al Pesach Heichel, on the entry of the Heichel. And Ba'afi Asa Tavish Shalzav, she also made a golden tablet, Sheparsha Saitik Subala, that the parsha of the site of the suspected adulterous woman was written on that, so that they didn't have to bring a Torah to write from it, the scroll for the Saita, which they had to write whenever the Mikdash was a suspected adulterous woman. Now Nicanor, that was his name in Nicanor, Nasser Nisim miracles happened for his doors that he brought, which was on the eastern part of the Azar, which the Gemara is going to explain what that miracle was. Again, by Yom, they recalled all these individuals praiseworthy. Now the Gemara says, with the comment from the fact that you said that the lottery of the boxes was Litzav and HaMizbeach, that you had to pull it opposite the Mizbeach towards the north, the inference is that the Mizbeach was not in the north, meaning no part of the Mizbeach was in the northern part of the Azar. And therefore, had it been east of the Mizbeach a little bit, it wouldn't be in the north, because you're saying it has to be Litzav and HaMizbeach. Obviously, the Mizbeach itself is not in the north, because it would be, why do you have to be, again, it wasn't during the Shechita here, you were actually all the way towards the east anyway. So why does it have to be to the north of the Mizbeach? It could have been on the side of the Mizbeach. Obviously, none of the Mizbeach was in the north. So says the Gemara, so Mani, who's the Talmud of Mishnah? Elazar Yaakov, he's going like Elazar Yaakov, the Talmud in the Brisa. The Pasuk says, when you're shachting al Yerech Mizbeach, it says, Tzafayna should be to the north of Hashem. What does that mean? Sheitzafin Kule Panei. The north should be totally cleared, Divrei Elazar Yaakov, which Rashi gives a very vague, which is different interpretation of what Rashi is saying. According to one interpretation, Tzafayna is means eerie. That it's this ear there, there's nothing there. Now, when it says Litzvayna, the hay is extra, because it already says Litzafin. It already says that it should be tzaf. What's tzafayna? Which, interesting, many times it says tzafayna, but here it sounds like you didn't have to say el tzafin. That's extra. So it sounds like that the ear space should be open. That means to say there's nothing there on the north. So again, there's different interpretations how to explain it. But Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg holds that there's nothing there, and therefore that he must be the Talmud of Mishnah, that even the Mizbeach wasn't there. So it says the Gemara, but how can you say this? Varesha, the previous Mishnah we just learned, holds Rabbi Shimon, he said that the Mizbeach was partially in the north, as we said, where he validates the shechting of the par Benul Mizbeach, which obviously that's considered north. So that's why I said you have to remember the coordinates when we say Benul Mizbeach, what that means, because the Gemara answers, no, Kul Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, it's all Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. The Tani, and you should read in the previous Mishnah, when we said the pole was standing, either the gear says Bibein or Kibbein Ul Mizbeach, means to say, it was near when we say between Ul Mizbeach, we mean to say going from east to west. But when you're considering from the north, you actually just made it closer towards like we said, towards the west, because of the weakness of the Kohen Gadol. But it wasn't actually between Ul Mizbeach going from north to south. That wasn't there, because that would be in the south, and that's be in the north. Right? That's what it said, if you recall. There's no perfect picture over here, but as I'm saying, depend what direction you're looking at. That we're saying, when you say Benul Mizbeach, means to say it was only Benul Mizbeach from east to west, so it's further along. But it wasn't Benul Mizbeach literally legit between Mizbeach, because Mizbeach was in the south. It just means in that east to west, but north to south, it was in the north. Yeah, but it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. If you cut it that way, yeah. Now we said in the Mishnah that Haskan b'mina v'reish beis b'smaila. We had the Skan, the deputy, on his right side, and the reish beis on his left side. Now Rabbi Yehuda, he says halacha that's going to relate right back to this halacha. If someone walks to the right of his teacher, he's ignoramus, meaning he doesn't even know derech eretz, even regular conduct. Forget about this, not the halacha. It means he's a bored. It's not appropriate to walk to the right of your rabbi. Now the problem is, says the it's not in our Mishnah. Haskan b'mina. We said the attendant, who's the lower one, stands to his right. And the head of the court is on his left. So I thought you're not supposed to walk to the right of your superior. We learn the Brisa. You have three people walking on the road, so they shouldn't go in a single file line, one after the other. Rather, they should be in one road together. Harab be'emtza, the teacher is in the middle. God will be the greatest of the students is to his right, and this less one is to his left. We find by the angels that came in front of Avram Avinu, like it says in Bereshit Yitches, says Shloisha Nashim Tzamalav. Now, it's obviously that they were standing one by the side of the other, because it would be one behind the other. It wouldn't be Shloisha Nitzamalav. It would be only one Nitzamalav, and they would all be behind. Obviously, they were standing side by side. And how was it? Michal be'emtzi had the Malach Michal in the middle. Gavril was on the right, Rafal was on the left. So how could you say you're not supposed to walk to the right of your Rebbe? Our Mishnah and other sources seem to indicate that you should go to the right. So Targum Rav Shmuel Papa Kamid Ravadi explains, no, this that we say you should go to the right doesn't mean you should go to the side, because that's actually a bur. Rather, it's from behind, so that his teacher should be covered. Now, the greatest one, however, covers him on the back from the right, and the lower one covers him in the back from the left. But they're both behind the teacher, you shouldn't be on the side. So how can you say, but tell him in the Bryce, I'm a half connected rabbi. If someone goes opposite his teacher, he's a bur, he's ignoramus. A chayr rabbi is behind his teacher, he's Magaseh Ruach, he's considered arrogant. So how can you say you're going behind him? Says Gemara, no, the answer is the mitzadet atzdude. What it was actually was that it was diagonal. It wasn't literally on the side and wasn't literally behind. Rather, you're covering your teacher a little bit from either side. That's why we say that we had the skan was miminoi and the Merashav Mismail. It wasn't literally on the side, it wasn't literally behind, it was somewhere on the angle. Now we said Bekalfi Hasham that there was these boxes over there. Bash Negerelis had two ladders on that. So the Gemara explains, Rabbi learned the Brisa, what exactly was over here in this box. It says in the pasuk in Vayikra B'Nosna Aaron al Shnei Hashim Gerelis. Aaron put on the two he-goats lotteries. Says the Gemara, first of all, Gerelis shall call Dava. First of all, the lotteries were able to be made, these tablets were able to be made out of any substance, whatever you want to make it out of. Now, it says the Brisa, Yochel Yitin Shnei Mazeh. You would think that you have to put two lotteries on this goat, Vishnei Mazeh, two lotteries on the other goat. And the pasuk is saying you should put on each one of them goyrolis, which sounds like two. So you would think each one should have two goyrolis put on it. Tamalim is the pasuk teaches, and the pasuk no goyrol echel Hashem, goyrol echel Hashem. The pasuk says explicitly that no, it's only going to be one Lashem that's going to have one girl put on it, and that's also going to have one lottery put on it. Ein kan Lashem el goyrol echad. Lashem only has one lottery. Ein kan Lazazal echad, and the other one only has one ticket put on it. Now, but still yochad yitin shal shem b'shal Azazal. So you would think you put shal shem and Azazal on this one. And then put Shem and Azazel on the other one, because as Rashi explains, you have to fulfill where it says V'nasan, you're going to put Gairalois, which sounds like that there's plural, that there's going to be two on each one of them. And then, so which one's Lashem Azazel? So Rashi, which disagrees, holds that yeah, whichever one you want, you ultimately make Lashem. You're going to put both Lashem and Azazel on either one of them. Tamaleva has the pasuk teach no. Goril Echel Hashem, there's going to be only one Goril for Hashem, which sounds like that I know there's only one. So why say one? To expound it, to say, In Kal Hashem Alecha, no, the one that's going to be Hashem only has one ticket that's put on it. Ben Kal Lazaz Alecha, and Lazaz will touch to discuss exactly how to translate exactly these different havminas. And Lazaz is only going to have one. So if that's the case, then Matamalim Garolis. Why tell me plural Garolis? If you're telling me that because each one has to have two, I understand why you're saying plural, but I know 1 + 1 is 2. If you tell me each one needs one, so why tell me there's going to be Garolis if you're saying each one doesn't have two? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. Shiur Shavin. The reason why we're saying the plural is because they have to be the same. So we're comparing them in the plural of saying they're the same. That one shouldn't be made out of gold, the one shouldn't be made out of silver, that one should be big, one should be small. That's why it says Garolas. Now when the Gemara explains, it said in the Brisa, Garolas should call David, that the lotteries could be made out of any material. So it's more Pshita, obviously. So Gemara, no, it's necessary. Why? The time like within the Brisa. The feature mitzvah mitzvahs because we find by the tzitz that the kohen gadol wore Hashem kazal with God's name written on there where it said kohen Hashem. Fushas have to be made out of gold. Yochelav zekin. You would think also the garol is because you have one that it says Lashem on it. It would have to be made out of gold. Tamalim garol. Therefore it says more than one time in the pasuk garol. To tell you riba, it's coming to include riba shel zayis whether made out of olive wood, riba shel eggers whether made out of nut wood, riba shel eshkrei maybe it's made out of boxwood. It doesn't make a difference. They're all going to be val, which ultimately, however, they did make it out of gold, but it could be made out of any material. Now we said in the Mishnah that Ben Katan, Asa Shneim Asa Dad Lakir, we spoke about other people that made upgrades. Ben Katan was a Katan, he made 12 spouts for the Kir. Now talking about the Brisa, why did he do this? Because shiur Shneim Asa Achav HaKahanim, so they had the 12 Kahanim, Ha'asukim B'Tamid, that doing the Avodah by the Karban Tamid, Mekach and Demek Lem, they have to do it at one time, they have to wait in line, because they were all do 30 Kahanim, one of them did the Shechita, they didn't have to do Kir Demek Lem. So yeah, the 12 Kahanim, they could do wash hands at one time. Now telling them the Brisa that originally, when they only had 2 spouts, like we said, one on top, one on the bottom, Shachris b'miluis, so Shachris, when it was full, Mekadosh Shezrak from the Elin, he would wash his hands and feet from the upper spout. Arvis, b'yudasai, but in the evening when it was lower down the water, Mekadosh Shezrak from the Tachni, he would wash his hands and feet from the lower one. Now, it's in the Mishnah, Asa Muchni Kir, also upgraded that he made a Muchni for the Kir. So he's going, my Muchni, what's a Muchni? And Mabai says, Gilgal, it's a wheel to have a Meshakale that he would submerge, like we said in the Mishnah, that it shouldn't be Lina. Now we said Munbez HaMelech, Asa Kol Yad Zaken L'chol, he made all the handles of the vessel that were used in Yom Kippur made out of gold. Says Nafdina Lididu, why do you make the vessel itself out of gold? Why are you upgrading just the handles and not the vessel itself? So he continues on with Beis HaMabai, he says because we're talking about the handles of the knives. Now a knife itself you can't make it out of gold. Gold is not going to cut well, therefore they couldn't make it out of gold. So the Gemara asks, however, from a Brisa, The Brisa says, Afu asa kani kelim. They also made the base where you put the vessels out of gold. V'ugne kelim, and also where you hold on to it out of gold. V'yidois kelim, and the handles of the vessels, and v'yidois sakin, the handles of the knives. Out of gold. So you already mentioned knives and you mentioned kalim. So obviously it wasn't only knives. So then we're back to the question: why do you make the vessel itself out of gold? So the Gemara, no, Tuguma Abaya interprets what are these kalim is bakasasa dinarge v'chatzini. We're talking about the handles of the hatchets and the sickles, which those also can't be made out of gold because you're going to go with gold and it's going to ruin the vessel. So you're right. Regular vessels maybe we make it out of gold, but these handles that you mean only the handles are talking about those with the vessel itself cannot be made out of gold. Now, Hilmi Imai, we said in the Mishnah that his mother, Hilmi, also in the Bresha Shazal, Bechula made a golden candelabra. So, tell in the Brisa, interestingly, the Shosha Chamazarachas, when the sun would shine, Nitzaitz, you got these sparks, which is from the rays of the sun coming from the east, which are facing towards the Heichel, which is on the western front, they came out of the menorah, because it was shining on the gold. Everyone knew it's time for Krishma, like we learned in the Brisa and Brachas Avavav, the mitzvah is to do it. And you know the sun is shining now because it's glaring off the menorah. Now, we learned in the Brisa, however, said someone says Shema in the morning with the people of the Mishmar and the people of the Maimed. Well, Yatz not fulfilled his obligation. Why? Because the people of the Mishmar, the Kahanim that the avoid is imposed on them, Mashkim, they actually went to sage before it was even daybreak. Because maybe they're going to be busy with the avodah, which they're doing, which is really what Shachris is, to correlate to the avodah of the Talmud, and they're going to not say it, so they said it before this month. Vachi Maimed, the people of Israel, like we said, who are there to the agency of the tzibah on the carbon, like it says, Tishmal Hakavli, the mitzvah is that they should be there until they stand on the carbon, as the Gemara says in time of Chavav Menal. Ma'achim, they actually said Krishma later on the day, until the avodah Talmud was done. So who is it that you're saying it's time for Zman Krishma? The Khan did it before, the Yisrael did it later, so who's it for? Amabai says, L'sham and Yerushalayim is for the other people of Yerushalayim who came to the Azara, for them to know, the onlookers, for them to know it's time for Krishma. Now it says, V'avi also tablet, that she also made a tablet. Shami no, it says the Gemara, we learn from this Kais Megillah Tinnik, to write a Megillah of a Tinnik, which are part of the Sefer Torah. Let's learn from the which the Machlekes and Masechtas Gittin of Samach Manal, where here you see you're writing part of the Sefer Torah on the tablet. You're allowed to write just parts of the Sefer Torah. So on Amar Shadishim Riyam, he says, no, we're talking about Alabes, written which are the letters of Rashi Tevis of Alabes. So the Gemara says, we learn the Brisa, when the Kohen would write Megillah to order to give the Saita to drink, he would see what's written in the tablet. So you see that it was written literally, the words itself, not the alphabet. It says, even though say Roy because of Kamash, because of the tabla, because it was according to the Simon of the Isis alphabet. Amazing Gemara says, because Shukai says when you write Roy because of Mash, because of the tabla, and Mark because of the tabla, it says what was written, said by Midbaim Shachim, Ishaisakim, Loy Shachim, and Satis, and Loy Satis. Awesome, says the Gemara, between Alam Chesam and Aleph, is Bisirugin. That's what we're talking about. It said in Loy Shachim, then Rashi Tevis till the end of the pasuk. But Atki Satis, if you had infidelity, then Rosh Tevis to the end of the pasuk. Yit Nashem Oischa, and then Rosh Tevis to the end of the pasuk. But Mayim, that was Rosh Tevis, and therefore it wasn't the whole thing as a Megillah, so there was no right that you read Megillah for anything to any time.